Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero podcast, the show where I cover the least in the best way possible. I'm your host, Jason Wells. Today is Wednesday, January 8th. NFL season officially done. For the select few who made the playoffs, congratulations. We will talk to you on Friday. This is the episode for all the losers out there, myself included. We will be talking about all the teams that didn't make it, what their offseason plans should and maybe will look like. Starting off with the only 10-7 team to not make the playoffs, the Seahawks, and going all the way down to the number one pick team, the Titans. We'll end the episode with a top 10 mock draft, just to get into the taste of mock draft season and the draft season in general, but should be a good episode. Lots of firings to talk about too. It is, again, it's that time of year. So yeah, we'll talk about everything when we talk about everything. But yeah, I guess let's just get straight into the episode here. I will start off before I talk about, start off the Seahawks and their offseason plans or what they should look like anyways. It's been more evident now than I think in any other year prior that I've been watching the NFL. And maybe this is because I'm more intently watching when I do focus on games and everything. Because I'm more in tune now about the NFL in general than I was in years past. And obviously, if I'm doing a podcast where I'm trying to cover most of the NFL, I should be. But there are so many bad owners out there. And we'll talk about these bad owners in just a little bit, but it's mind-blowing, some of the decisions that teams are making. Just I don't know. And again, I guess we'll save it for when we talk about those teams. But again, some really weird and bad decisions that have been made on Monday and even today on Tuesday. But yeah, I guess let's just start off with the Seahawks here, the only 10-7 team to not make the playoffs. Getting the reaction from Seahawks fans, it was a bit of a mixed bag on how the season went. To me, the season was a success. Yeah, did you miss the playoffs? Sure, you did. But having a 10-7 record while in the first year of a rookie head coach after Pete Carroll has been kind of like the stability there for over a decade, I think that's signs of or they're heading in the right direction anyways. And in that second half of the season too, once they got guys back from injury on that defense, the defense looked great. I'm very excited to see what Leonard Williams can do in his second year in the Seahawks defense. See if Byron Murphy can make a bit of a jump. Lots of pieces to like on the Seahawks defense, and we'll talk about one of these firings already, but Seahawks did fire offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb in his lone season in the NFL. Some people point, it's like, what are you supposed to do when your offensive line play is absolutely terrible and yada, 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 but yeah, the offensive line was bad, and don't get me wrong, the offensive line, especially the interior of that offensive line for the Seahawks, dreadful. But again, when you have a competent QB in Geno Smith, and then guys like DK Metcalf, JSN, who had a breakout year, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, you have enough weapons where the offense should look more functional at least, and I think that's where the disconnect was, where the offense never really looked good, or looked great, I should say, because it did look good, but there wasn't any consistency in the offense or what they were doing, and I think the NFL is just a little too big for Ryan Grubb and what he wanted to do, and yeah, do I think that only giving him 1 year and a bad offensive line to figure it out is really fair? No, not really, but I don't think that he would have been the solution either. So now he'll get to go, maybe go back with his former head coach, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, maybe be their offensive coordinator, I don't know. But the Seahawks, I think that they should be optimistic for the future. They do have to figure out who the QB of the future will be, because Geno Smith, although I think he's a good, solid quarterback. He's not the future. He's not going to take you to the promised land, win another Super Bowl. You got to find someone else at some point. Don't think it's going to be this draft, because this draft stinks. But what the Seahawks should absolutely be focusing on with pick number 18 is someone on that interior of the offensive line. Again, I'm relatively new into this draft process, but I think I think it's Tyler Booker out of Alabama. I think he's one of the better interior players in this class. That might be a guy who could fall to them. Again, lots of time between now and when the draft happens, but I think the Seahawks should be happy with how the first year under Mike Macdonald looked, especially with how that defense looked in the second half of the season. Things you would imagine would get better on offense. Going into next year, it will be a new system, so that'll be tough to adjust to, but really not a lot of negatives to say about the Seahawks, which I think that's a positive. Fix the offensive line. That's the big thing. That's been the big thing. It's been one of the biggest knocks that they've had for a while. And maybe the GM, John Schneider. Is that right, John Schneider? I think that's right. Maybe that's something that you should do. I mean, you've only been the GM there for over a decade. Maybe fix the offensive line. But either way, Seattle, good season. We'll move on to the team picking 17th here, the Cincinnati Bengals, finishing 9-8. It basically came down to week 1 for them, where if you beat the Patriots, who finished with 4 wins on the season, you would have made the playoffs. But here you are, out of the playoffs again for the second straight year, finishing with the same record as you did last year. And this was, again, mainly to blame the defense. And I don't think this defense had a lot of really good players. They also dealt with injuries, but Lou Anarumo, their defensive coordinator, has been fired. And I get it. He didn't really adjust to what he had on the field. And to me, the signs of a great coach is someone who can adjust on the fly no matter who is out there for them. And that's something that Lou didn't really do. I'm sure that Bengals fans will appreciate him for what he did in their Super Bowl run, because his defense was the reason why the Bengals made that Super Bowl run. Forget Joe Burrow and that offense. It was the defense that carried them there. But he's now gone, and they have a lot to fix on defense. But the Bengals also have a lot of other question marks going into the offseason, too. Still haven't paid Ja'Marr Chase. T. Higgins is a free agent. Will they just tag him again? Because honestly, the franchise tag for a wide receiver really isn't that bad. It would suck for T. Higgins to get tagged again instead of earning a big bag from someone in free agency. But a lot needs to get figured out, and figured out relatively quickly for the Bengals. Because right now, it's funny. The Bengals this season, they had Joe Burrow, who led in passing yards, TDs, had an incredible season as their quarterback. Ja'Marr Chase, the Triple Crown winner, most catches, most yards, most TDs for any receiver in the league this year. And then they had Trey Hendrickson lead the league in sacks with 17, and none of these guys are going to win any awards. I honestly just think that's funny. It's typical Bengals, and again, they paid Burrow. They still haven't paid Ja'Marr Chase, who can literally ask for any amount of money he wants. And they've been wishy-washy about whether or not they bring Trey Hendrickson back. They absolutely should. I don't know why you wouldn't pay that man, but the Bengals are just a notoriously cheap franchise, and this is part of one of these bad ownership groups that I talk about, is the Bengals constantly let good players out the door. It happens a lot, and they're probably going to do it with T. Higgins. They're probably going to do it with Trey Hendrickson. And hey, make me eat my words. That would be great if they don't. I think that's what the Bengals should do. They should be able to keep all those guys, but cheap franchises tend to not do these things, where if you're going into next year and you don't have T. Higgins, you need to find another wide receiver number 2. It can't just be Ja'Marr. I mean, it can just be Jamar. He is really fucking good. He'll still, even if he doesn't have another really good wide receiver to take away targets, Jamar is still going to eat because he's just, again, he's one, if not two, best receiver in the league, him and Justin Jefferson. You can argue there. I don't really care. But the rest of the roster is not good, especially the defense. Obviously, they'll get some guys back from injury, but they got a lot to figure out. They have a lot to figure out. They need they need basically every position on defense. They have some good guys who I like as, again, solid, capable starters, but as, true, this guy is like a cornerstone piece on your defense. It's Trey Hendrickson, and that's about it. And he might be out the door in 2026. Obviously, that's a far enough time. It's literally a year away from now, but Bengals got some shit to figure out. But as long as Joe Burrow is the quarterback and as long as Jamar Chase is still there, it'll be okay. Or at least the offense will be okay. The rest of it, as we saw this year, not great. So we can keep going here. The team picking 16th. The Arizona Cardinals finished 8-9 this year. When I did my mid-season review and projections for kind of the rest of the year, I was buying in on the Cardinals and what they were doing. And like every other typical Cardinals season since Kyler has got there, the second half of the season was just not good. Wasn't good whatsoever. Kyler had, again, his normal Kyler things where it would be like, holy shit, he's playing like a top 5 quarterback in the league. And then he would be like, why are they paying him that amount of money? And that's always a tough situation as an organization when your so-called franchise quarterbacks does have those big ebbs and flows where it's tough to play behind that. Marvin Harrison, people thought that he was going to be an immediate all-pro receiver out the gate. He had a solid season. Did he live up to anyone's standards with what he was thought of at the draft? Absolutely not. But he finished with, I think, just shy of 900 yards and 8 touchdowns on the year, which for any other rookie receiver, those would be great numbers. But with the expectations Marv had, he fell a little short. The running game was really good. James Conner did get hurt. Trey Benson also got hurt. Offensive line needs to figure it out. But I think Jonathan Gannon, I like him as a head coach, but he's a defensive guy. And I talk about he needs some cornerstone pieces on this defense. He's got Budda Baker right now, and I think Budda Baker is a very, very good safety, might make an all-pro team this year. But other than that, devoid of talent. Like, quite literally, there's not a lot of other people on that Cardinals defense who really, we need to talk about. I think Garrett Williams, I think I put him as, one of my breakout players. I think maybe he was solid. They got solid players kind of across the board, but they need above average starters, which other than Budda Baker, I don't know if they really have that. Their first round pick, Darius Robinson, I don't think he actually got into any games this year, which again, doesn't help, but I expected this team to take a little bit more of a jump on offense. I knew that the defense wasn't going to be great, but Jonathan Gannon had them playing well enough for most of the season. It's the offense that really failed this team this year, and really, I don't know how much else they could really add. Obviously, Kyler's there. Trey McBride is awesome. Marvin Harrison Jr. is hopefully their wide receiver one of the future. I mean, he is their wide receiver one of the future. The run game was good. The offensive line, could it use a little injection of talent on it, but it was good enough, and I think this offense is really what failed this Cardinals team at the end of the day. Going into the offseason in the future, it's a bunch of, again, add more talent to the defense. I think that should be their number one priority. Other than that, though, I expected bigger things from the Cardinals, and maybe, this was, year 6 of Kyler? Maybe we should just expect that this is who he is, where he'll have his moments where he plays like a top 5, top 10 quarterback, and then he'll have other moments where it's like, what the fuck are you doing out there? And it's hard to play winning football when you have a quarterback who you don't know from week to week which version of him you're going to get. So we'll keep moving here. With the number 15th pick, we have the Atlanta Falcons, 8-9 on the season. Absolutely disappointing season from the Falcons for many reasons. And I'm going to start, honestly, with what failed them the most, in my opinion. And actually, it was a tough one, because I was going to start talking about the defense and how that Panthers game, but it didn't really matter because the Bucs won at the end of the day and won the division. Didn't matter if the Falcons won, but I will start with the defense. You hire Raheem Morris, a defensive coach, to be your head coach. And yeah, you willfully neglected the edge position and honestly just the defense in general through the draft. And I kind of take that back, because they did draft guys on their defensive line who most of them were projects at the end of the day, but there was enough talent on that defense to not, let the Panthers score 40 on you. The Panthers, who best weapon, I was saying it this time last year, best weapon on the Panthers, Adam Thielen. I mean, it might be Jalen Coker. It's obviously Chuba Hubbard, but Chuba Hubbard is hurt. But you can't let that Panthers team score 40 against you in a must-win game. Because that defense, again, it has talent on it. A.J. Terrell, Grady Jarrett, Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates. There are enough guys there, and especially if you're a defensive coach, where you should be better. And again, a lot goes into it with the Kirk stuff too, where they paid Kirk a ton of money, and after, 13 games, 14 games, they're like, okay, Kirk, you're done. Michael Penix, go in. And Michael Penix has been okay. He's had some flashes. The arm strength has looked good, but he also, again, he makes a lot of weird plays, bad plays, where I said it a few weeks ago when he was going into his first start, but he was going into the best spot for a rookie quarterback to be in. That offensive line is very solid. The run game is good. Drake London is awesome. Darnell Mooney had a really good year. He was hurt, though, towards the end, like Kyle Pitts, I guess. I mean, I shouldn't really bring him up, but this Falcons season was just an overall disaster, top to bottom. And I don't really know what they do. Obviously, Michael Penix is their QB1 going into next year. Kirk, I guess you could try to trade him. I don't know who would want to give up any assets for Kirk after what we've seen, because it's not just like he doesn't have his any mobility anymore, because he never really did. The arm strength is just absolutely gone. And I don't know if another year of training and rehab and getting that ankle or his Achilles fully back really changes much, because his arm looked as good as mine. And obviously that's not true. My arm is terrible. But that was, again, paying Kirk all that money. If you cut him, you take the dead cap hit. But honestly, I don't know if any other teams out there really want Kirk to go be no one should trade for him. If the Falcons do end up cutting him, sure, but if you're going to have all that dead cap this season anyways, you might as well just keep him to be your backup. And maybe they're nice enough to take that dead cap hit and let Kirk go on the market. But to me, if I'm the Falcons, you might as well just keep Kirk. Yeah, so going into next year, it's just you have to hope that Michael Penix is the guy. I don't know if he is the guy, but to me, GM Terry Fontenot is on very thin ice. They neglected edge in the draft and decided to go give a third-round pick in this draft for Matt Judon, who absolutely did nothing for them. I don't know. It's questionable decisions from last offseason that's really biting them in the ass for this coming offseason, and they got to figure it out quickly, or else clean house, everyone should be gone. But they do have talented players that we should be excited about, so I guess that's something to talk about, but Falcons got some shit to figure out, that's for sure. With the number 14th pick in the NFL draft, it is the Indianapolis Colts. Only firing that they made is defense coordinator Gus Bradley is gone. Honestly, that's a move that should have happened. Again, he hasn't changed his defense literally ever. If you know how to beat his defense, you will be able to beat his defense. So he is gone. But really, the big moves that matter for the Colts is GM Chris Ballard, here to stay for now. Shane Steichen, here to stay for now. I think both guys start on the hot seat relatively early anyways. But yeah, the Colts, again, it was a really disappointing season for the Colts. Whether that be because of Anthony Richardson, who, again, he had his highs and your lows. You see the stuff that could make him a great quarterback. You also see the stuff that be like, wow, you're on par with Tim Tebow with completion rate. But this team is talented. Do they need, again, a true number one corner would be great for them. A true pass rusher would also be great for them. Maybe Leatu Latu takes that next step next year. Kwity Paye hasn't obviously been what they'd hoped he'd be, but there seems to be a culture issue in Indianapolis right now, which I think it kind of starts with Anthony Richardson and him not being accountable, taking plays off, and then the coaching staff going from Joe Flacco back to Anthony Richardson. There was a lot of weird decisions from the Colts this year, which I don't think help them in the long run. Now, I do like Shane Steichen as a head coach. I think that he is a very good offensive play caller. He has to rein in that team just a little bit, get everyone on the same page. Maybe they bring back Matt Eberflus as their defensive coordinator. I have no idea. Because, again, Matt Eberflus had that defense playing really well. I think that they've got some more talented guys than when he left for the Bears job. There's talented guys on the offensive line, talented guys. They have talented weapons. It literally all depends on Anthony Richardson. Because if Anthony Richardson starts off the year like he has looked, Ballard is gone, Steichen is gone, everyone is gone, and they're restarting again. I don't know. It's been... I like the Colts roster on paper anyways, but when you break it literally all depends on Anthony Richardson, on how he progresses in the offseason, and if he even does. Because if he doesn't, this Colts team is going to be picking in the top 10 more than likely. But I say that. They are talented, though. I don't know. Yeah. People were saying, Chris Ballard should be fired. I do... Again, he's on very thin ice right now, but I think Chris Ballard has done a very good job of bringing talent into this Colts organization, and I don't think you can really knock him for that. The only knock was benching Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco for a month this year, which that was the only weird thing I wouldn't have done, but other than that, Colts' direction is 50-50. It literally all depends on what Anthony Richardson ends up doing for this team. At pick number 13, we have the Miami Dolphins finishing with an 8-9 record. Typical. It's just a typical Dolphins season, finishing with around a 500 record with hopes going into the season. And here we are. Another disappointing season, to say the least. And Stephen Ross, the owner, comes out and says Mike McDaniel is safe, and so is GM Chris Grier, which I had some mixed feelings about it when the news first got announced. I do think that Chris Grier should be fired, but this is a make-or-break season for Grier and McDaniel going into next year, and if you fire them both at the end of next year and get, again, head coach and GM both hired at the same time on the same page, I like that, instead of doing the fire the GM, keep the head coach picks that GM, and that GM says no, this coach needs to go. Getting both GM and head coach in at the same time is very important, and if that's the plan for Miami this time next year, I'm okay with that. And obviously things could turn around. But my number one priority for this offseason is get Tyreek Hill the fuck off my team. He is a great player, one of the best receivers in the NFL. He had career years these past 2 years in Miami. Fantastic. He's making a shit ton of money to not show up in big games, and only Tua gets that flack, but Tyreek also drops, fumbles. He does it too. Hasn't shown up in big games for us, and then last week of the season, he just quits. He just quits against the Jets. He's trolling people online. He took a Photoshop picture of himself and put him on Antonio Brown when he quit the Bucks going against the Jets in that game too. Like, Tyreek Hill is just bad for the culture, bad for any team's culture, and I think most Dolphins fans want him gone. I think this is the first time that all Dolphins fans can agree that we don't want Tyreek Hill on this team anymore. Trade him for whatever, but we don't want him on the team for the start of next year. It's so frustrating to have a player like that who just quits, and when things don't go his way, that he starts pouting like a big baby. It's incredible that he can't be a leader, but what should we expect? I don't think that many people ever viewed Tyreek Hill as a leader. Of course not. He's not a good person in general, but I don't want Tyreek Hill on this team. I think that the vast majority of Dolphins fans don't want Tyreek on this team. We're just done with his bullshit. I think it's as simple as that. We're just done with Tyreek's bullshit. Trade him away for a third, fourth round pick. I truly do not care. I think that was one of the biggest mistakes of last offseason, was giving him an extension instead of this being the final year of his deal, and then we'll figure it out from there. Giving Tyreek, I think it was an extra 2-year extension on top of his deal, restructuring things, was a bad mistake by Chris Grier. And there was a lot of bad mistakes from Grier, but this Dolphins team is frustrating, and we're going to essentially be running it back next year with the exact same problems in place and the exact same people in charge of those problems that have not fixed them. Nothing will change next year. I think that my only hope of how the Dolphins could be good, maybe a playoff team, is one, Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator, doesn't get a head coaching job. I hope he stays. He did a great job with this defense, again, especially with all the injuries, but the defense is what could be really good for the Dolphins next year. I think that this defense started to really put it together again that second half of the season, despite all the injuries. And going into next year, Jalen Phillips will be back by week 1. Bradley Chubb, who didn't play at all this year, and I don't know if he's going to be the Dolphins. We have an out in his contract, I believe. We need some cap space in general, but let's just say that Bradley Chubb is there. So Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson had an excellent rookie year. He will still be there. Zach Seiler was great. Jalen Ramsey is still, again, he's not what he used to be. I don't think he's a top 3, top 5 corner in the league, but he is a weapon to any defense in the NFL still. We got to figure out the safeties. Jordan Brooks was good, but there's enough talent on that defense, especially with the pass rush, where we could have a very good pass rush next year, and that could be the saving grace for the Dolphins, but got to figure out the offensive line, especially the interior. Aaron Brewer, the center, he had a very good year, but both those guard spots were absolutely terrible. Liam Eichenberg, get him off my team. He's the new Jesse Davis. Absolutely god-awful, and as soon as we replace him with Isaiah Wynn, oh my god, look at that, the run game looks good. Achan's averaging 10 yards a carry again. But, yeah, same old shit. And especially, again, I haven't even mentioned Tua, but we have a quarterback who we're paying $55 million a year who we know can't stay healthy. It sucks. I like Tua. I do think Tua is a very good quarterback, but if he can't stay healthy, then that tanks most of our seasons. We can't rely on a backup to just carry us through these games. Should backup QB absolutely be a priority? Of course it should, but I don't know. Yeah, we're in a weird mode next year where basically the team you see in front of you now will be the team at the start of the 2025 season, other than like a few free agency signings. I don't expect any big splash moves. The draft will be the draft. I don't know. I've had hope the last basically since Mike McDaniel took over as head coach. So that's 3 seasons. I had hopes in playoff aspirations and a playoff win, divisional, maybe win the division. This year, I'm back to my old Dolphins ways where why should I expect anything differently than what they've done in previous years? I don't think the offense will change fundamentally what they do, and I think that's a big problem. I've already said it. I do think the defense could take a big step forward again. I think they're already a good unit, but that pass rush could be really good. That might be the only saving grace going into next year, because other than that, I don't know what there is to be excited for. So I'll stop talking about the Dolphins, and we can go on to the next team. Picking at number 12, the Dallas Cowboys, finishing with a 7-10 record. Cowboys are one of these teams where bad ownership is absolutely killing them. And I don't know if just because there's more media coverage than ever right now, and the Cowboys, whenever they're in the news, it is news because they're the Cowboys and Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is awful at what he does. He is a terrible GM. Yeah, he had those 90s Cowboys years, and that's great. That was 3 decades ago now. What he has done since has been absolutely tragic, and I will talk about their Week 18 game against the against the Commanders, where they put in Trey Lance. So they traded a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance, and they finally put him in the final week of the season to let's see what Trey Lance has. Sure, why not? Whatever. But the reason that they did this is because Cooper Rush, if he played that full game, which he would have played 55% of the snaps and would have earned him a nice little $500K bonus in his playing time incentives. So obviously he did not hit that because Trey Lance started. And it should have been the case where Trey Lance started as soon as Dak gets hurt. You put Trey Lance in, you see what he has, you see what he's got, because you know exactly what Cooper Rush is. Cooper Rush is a very good backup quarterback. See if Trey Lance can do anything better. You paid a 4th-round pick for him. You might as well see what you got. But no, in the last week of the season, Jerry Jones decides to make that call and start Trey Lance, and Cooper Rush doesn't get his incentive money. Players will take notice of that. And what makes it even worse is someone asked Jerry if he'd ever give up GM duties, and he just flat out said no. He's like, I bought this team. This is my team. I'm going to be general manager for as long as I own this team. You don't want an 80-year-old man who comes from oil to be the man making all the decisions of your football team. And it's shown why the Cowboys haven't been successful since the 90s, because Jerry Jones is in charge. Again, he has grown that Cowboys brand into something, I won't say bigger than football, because football is massive. But again, the Cowboys are one of the most popular NFL brands worldwide. And largely, that's a big part of Jerry. He is a great businessman. As a football mind, he's an absolute idiot. And if it weren't for the other people who were also in his ear, I don't know how bad this organization would look. Will McClay, their assistant GM, he's an absolute saint for dealing with him. I would have left for some other job years ago if I was him. And who knows, he might. But yeah, Cowboys got a lot of shit to figure out. The offensive line, they added, again, rookies. The offensive line was fine. They had absolutely no running game. Rico Dowdle came alive kind of that second half of the season, and he's a solid running back. Do I think he's a bell cow guy and the Cowboys should avoid running back in free agency or the draft? Absolutely not. They have CeeDee Lamb as their really one true weapon. That's tough. And then on the defense, Trayvon Diggs is going to be out for a while. Will probably miss the start of the season. Micah Parsons is an absolute freak in multiple senses, but you got to pay him. I don't know. It's it's rough times ahead for the Cowboys, in my opinion. Mike McCarthy, they don't know if Mike McCarthy is their head coach. There's been no news about that as of, again, Tuesday at 3:17 p.m. No news about what the Cowboys are doing with Mike McCarthy. His deal is, in fact, done. But I don't know. As long as Jerry is there, it won't matter because Jerry just makes bad football decisions. I think in literally any mock draft at 12, just write in Ashton Jeanty. It's the most Jerry pick. It's the most obvious pick in the world. Of course, they'll pick Ashton Jeanty, and this isn't a knock at Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty is incredible. Absolutely is a top 10 player in this class, but the Cowboys have so many other needs than drafting a fucking running back, and that's exactly what they're going to do at 12 is draft a running back. I can, put that in, mail that in already. The Cowboys are drafting Ashton Jeanty at 12. I'm very confident about that. We can move on here, though, to the team picking number 11, the San Francisco 49ers. 6-11 on the year. Incredibly disappointing season for the Niners. And lots of injuries, lots of moments that they had earlier in the season where games that they should have won, which they blew the lead. Everything went wrong for the Niners this year, essentially. And heading into next year, I'm confident that they can be a Super Bowl contending team again. Obviously, you got to hope that Trent Williams is back because Trent Williams is a very key piece on that offense. But that offensive line needs to get better in general. They are thrilled that they drafted Dominic Pooney, and he turned out to be a stud guard from day one. Essentially, I think Debo is gone. I don't think that there's a way that they can make his money work, but I think they're okay with that. You got to hope that Brandon Ayuk, when he comes back, that he ends up being that guy from the 2023 season and not the start of this season. But again, full off season of training camp, I expect Ayuk to be who he was, and that is a fringe top 10 receiver in this league. Kittle is still awesome. They'll have CMC back fully healthy. They'll still have Isaac Guerendo. The defense is solid. They'll need another cornerback. Charvarius Ward is a free agent, and I think I talked about it when it happened, but him and his wife lost their child, and both of them just don't want to live in California anymore because of that, which is totally fine, but he's already out the door, essentially. So they need to find another number one corner, but the Niners are still built to win, at least for next season. After that, they got to figure out the Purdy contract. They got to figure out, again, that's when money comes into play, and when you don't have a QB on a rookie deal, some tough decisions need to be made. But at least for right now, I'm confident next year that the Niners should get back to their winning ways, winning the division potentially, because they have the pieces. Just all of those pieces got hurt at one time or another throughout the year. But this team, when everyone's fully healthy, should be contending for Super Bowls. So I'm confident in what the Niners will do. They'll add some pieces in the offseason. They'll do their thing, but their main group, their core group of players, they will all still be back except for Debo, and that's big for them. And even with Debo, they replaced him with Ricky Pearsall, and Ricky Pearsall had some good games late in the season, so I'm interested to see what the offense looks without Debo, with CMC back in the mix. It should be much better, and I'm expecting this Niners team to be much better than 6-11, especially because they're going to have that fourth place division schedule, which that'll help them a lot. We are into the top 10 teams now, starting off at number 10, the Chicago Bears, 5-12 on the year. Ending the year, though, with a win against the Packers, which hasn't happened since 2018, so I guess kudos to them. Obviously, picking a few picks higher would have been a little bit nice, but beating the Packers, beating a big division rival, especially someone that you haven't beaten in 6 years, pretty big. So, and what do the Bears do now? Obviously, they need to find their head coach, and it should be Ben Johnson should be their number one priority. Get Caleb someone who is going to bring out his talent in the best way possible, because we saw the flashes of Caleb and what he could be. We also saw some very inconsistent QB play and some very bad QB play. And Bears fans want to point to like, oh, Caleb Williams didn't throw an interception for, I think it ended up being 10 straight games, maybe 11 straight games. I don't think that's a good thing. Like, especially when your team sucks, I want my QB taking risks, taking chances, and not playing it safe. And I think that the coaches got in Caleb's head way too early about you need to make mistake-free football, and that's what he ended up doing. And Caleb's a gamer. Like, he can go out there and make the difference in any game, but he was timid. And timid, not a good quality that you want in your quarterback. And I think pairing him with the right offensive head coach should be the way to go. If it's not Ben Johnson, you would hope it would be someone like Mike Vrabel, but I don't know. The Bears continually make bad decisions. Again, they're one of these teams now who owner or head coach, GM, they're not on the same timeline anymore. And it's a rumor, but the rumor is that Ryan Poles, the GM, is advising other Bears higher up management to stay away from Ben Johnson because he thinks that if Ben Johnson gets the job, that he will be out the door relatively quickly, and I think he should be. I don't think that Ryan Poles deserves a chance to get this team right. He failed. He failed last season when he should have fired Matt Eberflus then and there, and pair up Caleb with, I think Jim Harbaugh would have been the pick, and again, we saw what the Chargers did this year. It would have looked much, much better than what the Bears put on paper this year. They got to figure out that offensive line just a little bit. I think they got some pieces on it. I still like Darnell Wright, who they drafted in 2023. They obviously have the weapons. DJ Moore is a very good receiver, didn't have a great year. I still believe in Rome Odunze to also be a wide receiver one eventually in this league. The defense has a lot of solid pieces on it as well, but the Bears were so disappointing this year, and like disappointing on every single level. And again, it's all going to come down to this head coaching hire. If they don't hire someone who is a true alpha or like an offensive, like if it's not Ben Johnson, if it's not Joe Brady or Liam Cohen, or I don't know, if they end up with someone like Ron Rivera or Rex Ryan or Pete Carroll, ownership, again, another just ownership constantly getting in the way of their own team. And the reason why the Bears have been an absolute failure, again, have never had a 4,000-yard passer in the history of their franchise. Only team in the NFL that never done that. The Bears are embarrassing, and it's a very key offseason for them to be which direction do they want to go as a franchise. At number 9 here, we have the New Orleans Saints finishing 5-12. Going into the year, I was very, very low on the Saints. I was like, this is going to be a team that is one of the worst teams in the league, and technically I was right. But what I saw from the Saints post the Dennis Allen firing was a lot of fight in them, and I give Darren Rizzi, their interim head coach, a ton of credit for how the rest of the season went for them. Yeah, they finished with 5 wins, but you look at the injuries that they had across the board, essentially. At one point, their entire interior offensive line was hurt. Chris Olave was knocked out for the season. Rashid Shaheed knocked out for the season. Derek Carr knocked out for a large portion of the year. Who on defense? They traded Marshawn Lattimore away. I don't know. Saints had a lot of injuries, and the fact that their offense was still competing in games, no Taysom Hill, obviously, that's the huge one, but the fact that like the Saints were still competitive in games with a roster, and especially a roster on offense that was devoid of talent. Again, when you have Spencer Rattler handing the ball off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire or throwing it to Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Cedric Wilson, the fact that they were able to stay in games with those being some of their key guys on offense, shout out to Darren Rizzi. He don't think he's going to get a head coaching job or whatever, but any team would be lucky for them to be their special teams coordinator. I would love for him to be the Dolphins special teams coordinator because Danny Crossman is a bum, and I don't know how he has survived multiple head coaches here in Miami, but he's bad at his job, and I would love to get Darren Rizzi to Miami, but the Saints are still in their spot where, because they've kicked the can down the road so many times now, where they're still in cap hell. They're going to have to restructure more guys, and it is what it is, but this seems like the first time, at least for a while, where the Saints have at least bottomed out. Yeah, they're only picking at pick 9 with a 5-12 record, which kind of sucks for them, but they have guys on this team and younger talent, which it's not even that much younger talent when I think about it, but it's going to be another year of bottoming out for the Saints, and I don't think that there's anything that they can do in free agency and the draft that will really change my mind on that. They're just simply not going to be a good team next year, and even probably the year after that. So, to me, if I'm the Saints, you focus on the trenches. You build that offensive line. You build that defensive line, who is old as hell, back up again. And then you finally find your quarterback. And as it comes for head coaching hires, the guy who I think that they will be linked to is Aaron Glenn, someone who worked for the Saints way back when with Sean Payton, who I think also played for the Saints as a player, if I'm not mistaken. I think that sounds right. That just seems like a natural fit. And what Aaron Glenn has done with that Lions defense, especially with all the injuries that they've dealt with, has been nothing short of impressive. And again, I think he's a culture builder. I think he's exactly what the Saints team needs. He just needs enough time and a grace period, and for the front office to realize that this is a long rebuild that they still have ahead of him because of all of the cap issues that GM Mickey Loomis has given them. So this is the most, and I won't say confident, but it's the most, what's the right word? Damn, I'm really not going to think of the right word, huh? That's embarrassing. I'm still not going to think about it. I guess it's the most confident I felt in the Saints for quite some time because they finally bottomed out. And they're going to continue bottoming out for at least the next couple years, I'd imagine. And I don't think that's a bad thing. They need so much help everywhere. They need an influx of young talent on this very, very old roster. I think Mickey Loomis probably shouldn't have a job either, but I digress. We'll go on to the team that's picking number 8. It is the Carolina Panthers, also finishing with a 5-12 record, winning that last game of the season as well. What the Panthers have done this year has been honestly nothing short of remarkable. And the direction that they're heading in going into next year should have every single Panthers fan excited. At the start of this year, I had a lot of confidence in the Panthers. I was like, I liked the Dave Canales hire. I still believed in Bryce Young. I thought that the pieces that they brought in, the offensive line was solid, and the defense would be okay. Obviously, they need some help on defense, and we'll talk about that shortly, but I liked the direction that the Panthers were going into this last season. And Bryce Young started off absolutely terrible again, like he did in his rookie season, and it was like, fuck, that's it. The Panthers need to find another quarterback. They benched him for Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton did his Andy Dalton thing, and then it's like, okay, Bryce, go back in. And since Bryce has come back in, he's looked like a damn good quarterback. In that Week 18 game, finished it with 5 total TDs, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground. Bryce Young is the Panthers franchise QB going forward. And that's not something you could have said Week 5, Week 6, I don't actually know when he went back in, but like for the first half of this year, you could not say that Bryce Young was the franchise guy. And at the end of the year, being able to say, going into next year, that they are fully confident with Bryce Young going forward is absolutely huge for them, because that just means they're still in a rebuild, but It's much easier now because they have the quarterback figured out. Now, they got to add some pieces around that quarterback. That offensive line is very good. They should be very happy with how they invested in that last offseason. Now they need some weapons. Adam Thielen has still been his number one guy, which that's not great. Adam Thielen's still playing good football. He should still be on that roster going into next year. Rookie Jalen Coker had some flashes. He had some big plays. Xavier Leggett was a bit of a disappointment for me. You hope that he develops into maybe a true number one, but they got to get some real receiving threats for Bryce out there. But really, if you told me that the Panthers are going to run it back basically with the exact same guys on offense, I wouldn't be mad about it. Again, I think Adam Thielen is still solid. Not great. I think Jalen Coker could develop into maybe a good number 2-3 guy. Xavier Leggett, again, we're still not sure. You get Chuba Hubbard back. You get Jonathan Brooks back whenever he will come back from his ACL tear. Again, obviously, we don't know what kind of player he's going to be, but the offense will, with Bryce, with the exact same group of guys, will look functional, will look like an average offense. All depending on what Bryce does, could look above average. This defense needs help across the board. I'd say on defense, there are two guys who I'm confident in on the Panthers going forward. It is defensive tackle Derek Brown, who missed the majority of this year, and it's J.C. Horn, who had a very good season. Other than that, not a lot of guys to work with. Lots of injuries on that defense too, but they need help in a very, very bad way on defense, and that should be the key for them going into offseason. Yeah, again, it would be nice to add another better receiver than Coker, Thielen, and Leggett, and there's a decent amount of guys available in free agency that they should be able to get one at a decent price, but the focus for the Panthers this offseason is the defense, and if the defense can, again, not be terrible, I think that Moob texted the group chat and was like, the Panthers now have officially allowed the most points against in the history of the NFL. So, yeah, the defense needs to be much, much better next year. But again, I was really confident in the Panthers going into this season and what the turnaround could be. And that turnaround didn't happen until Bryce Young got benched and then went back in for the second half of the year. But now going in the next year, I am very confident with the direction of the Panthers and where they're going. Again, that defense just needs to get fixed, but again, I got confidence in the Panthers going forward. Moving on to the number 7th team, the New York Jets, finishing 5-12 on the year. Again, another team that ownership is just absolutely brutal. Woody Johnson needs to step aside, not have any decision-making powers whatsoever. Needs to get his sons out of the ears of people too. Again, using Madden ratings to decide who to bring in and who not to bring in is one of the worst things I've ever heard from any franchise ever. And there's been a lot of really stupid things that franchises have done, but the Jets are a dumpster fire, and that's what they continue to be. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be their starting quarterback next year, nor should he be, even if he wants to come back. They got their own kind of culture issue there in general, but again, roster-wise, they have some talented players. And going into next year, again, roster on paper, I like the roster. But the most important decision that they have to make again is this head coach GM combo that they're going to bring in and making the right hire at GM. Right now, they're interviewing guys like Matt Nagy, Brian Griese, Rex Ryan again. I don't know, if it's any... Again, I can't limit it to, if it has to be one of these 3-4 people or whatever, because there's a lot of jobs available right now. Not a lot of good jobs available, I'll add that, but the Jets at least have talent, and I'm going to do some off-season hot takes on Friday's episode, as well as kind of my playoff preview and whatnot, and go over my hot takes from this season too, but I think the Jets are going to have to make a big splash with a trade and get some future assets back for guys who won't be a part. Because as much as they don't want to call it a rebuild and call it a retool instead, not knowing who your QB is kind of makes it a rebuild. And while I do think the Jets roster on paper has a lot of talented players on it, they got to figure some shit out. And I don't think that they will this offseason. Again, there's a lot of stuff wrong with the Jets in general. And I don't think that they'll be able to fix it in one offseason, but you never know, I guess. I mean, we do know it's the Jets, but yeah, again, Woody Johnson being the owner will constantly fuck things up. Moving on to number 6 here, the Las Vegas Raiders finishing with a 4-13 record. Another team with out their QB of the future and also not in line to pick their QB of the future. Time will tell on that because, again, I don't think that if you're picking first overall, like if you're the Titans, you should not be banking on one of these QBs to be your guy. It's not a good draft class. It is not a good QB draft class. Just pick the best player. If someone wants to trade up for one of these QBs, you do that. It would not shock me if the Raiders wanted to trade up for one of these QBs just because, again, I think Mark Davis looks at Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders and be like, ooh, that's a flashy new thing. And I think Tom Telesco is enough of a pushover for Mark Davis to get in his ear and be like, trade up for number 1. We want Shedeur. I don't think the Raiders should. I think that would be a terrible mismanagement of assets, but the Raiders, I guess they have talent. Again, Max Crosby, Brock Bowers. I guess there's more guys I could add to that list, but like Jacoby Myers had a really good year. Christian Wilkins did miss most of the year, but he's still awesome. They got a lot to figure out. They're just in a best player available approach. There's been no decision made on Antonio Pierce, their head coach. What did Keegan say? Oh, as I say this, Keegan texts me sending an Ian Rappaport tweet saying the Raiders have fired head coach Antonio Pierce following a trying season despite a flurry at the end. So yeah, the Raiders now need a head coach. That might be, I don't know. Again, I wouldn't want to have Tom Telesco be my GM, but that might be one of the more interesting jobs anyways, because I don't think Mark Davis is a good owner, but he doesn't really have a hand in the football decisions. Have his GM and head coach hirings been good at all for, basically ever? No, not at all, but he stays out of the way for the most part. Okay, that kind of changes things, but I don't know. Yeah, the Raiders just need to take best player available. They have so many holes to fill on that roster. I don't think I need to keep talking about it. We can just keep going here. Picking at number 5 here, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, 4-13 on the season. They get rid of Doug Peterson. They get rid of the rest of the coaching staff, but somehow Trent Baalke, he's fine. I don't know why. This man must have something over a few owners in the league because he has now won that power struggle several different times, and this even goes back to his Niners days where it was, I'm trying to remember who he hired, but it was, he lost the power struggle with Jim Harbaugh. We all saw how that went, but then hired Jim Tom Sula, fired Jim Tom Sula, hired Chip Kelly, fired Chip Kelly. Then he finally lost his job there, goes to Jacksonville, hires Urban Meyer, fires Urban Meyer, hires Doug Peterson, fires Doug Peterson, and somehow he still has his job. He is one of the worst GMs of this century. He has not done a good job at all throughout any teams that he's been on. He has been lucky. He's caught lightning in a bottle with some of those Niners teams, and again, I'm going to give all the credit to Jim Harbaugh on those teams, but the Jags consistently pick in the top 5, it seems like every single year, and nothing changes. And now you're going to ask a head coach to go there with a GM who is not good at his job, and they are stuck with Trevor Lawrence until the year 2030. Trevor Lawrence's extension hasn't even kicked in yet. He still has... This is his final year on his rookie deal with the 5th-year option. 21, 22, 23, 24. Yeah, this is the final year of his rookie deal, and then he has the 5-year extension kick in. I still think that the Trevor Lawrence we all thought was going to be the generational guy is still in there. I don't believe he's some fringe top 20 quarterback. But my God, do the Jags need to figure it out. Because again, I think the Jags have talented people across the board on their team. Like Brian Thomas Jr. had an unbelievable rookie year. I think they've got guys on the offensive line who are solid. I think Josh Hines-Allen is great. Trayvon Walker gets a lot of flack for being the number 1 overall pick and taking over Aiden Hutchinson, but he's had back-to-back double-digit sacks, and he is a great run defender. What a shock that the guy who was seen as a project turned out to be a project and then developed into a really good player. Again, that's just a whole other Trayvon Walker rant, but I'll digress there. Tyson Campbell I like. Their linebacking core of Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun is good. Like, they got talent on the roster. It never works out for whatever reason, and I don't know. I'm shocked that Shad Khan didn't fire Trent Baalke, but again, it's another owner who is an idiot at the end of the day, who they constantly make the wrong decision over and over and over again. And this is just another one. But even in their press conference, with Trent Baalke also on the call, Shad Khan basically said, if there's a coach who comes in and wants to bring in their own GM, it's like, would you be willing to fire Trent? And he just flat out said yes. With Trent Baalke right there on the call. I don't understand the Jags, their philosophy, and just everything in general that they do. Again, another inept organization, which I don't credit. They got a lot to fix. We'll keep going, though. At number 4, we have the New England Patriots, finishing 4-13, winning that meaningless Week 18 game against the Bills, which dropped them from 1st overall to 4th. I don't think it really matters at the end of the day. Obviously, they would have liked to trade back and get those extra first round picks and second round picks. But again, this isn't really a draft to trade up for one of these quarterbacks anyways. I don't think anyone would do it, but I don't know. I'm smarter than some NFL GMs. I'll just say that. The Patriots, though, after 1 year of Gerard Mayo, have decided to cut ties with him. And I don't think it's a bad move. Do I think it's fair to Mayo to basically give him a dog shit roster that he had nothing to do with and then fire him after 1 year when that dog shit roster turned out to be a dog shit roster? Not at all. Did the defense absolutely regress under him? They were a top 10 unit last year. I keep seeing that. But again, they were a top 10 unit last year when they had Christian Barmore fully healthy, when Matt Judon was a starter on the team. Jabril Peppers missed the majority of this season too. Jawan Bentley missed almost all of this season too. Those are 4 key starters that they just did not have for this year. And maybe you can point to that for a reason why the pass defense regressed a little bit. The offense, we all knew it was going to be terrible going into the year, and it was terrible. So Gerard Mayo, definitely a scapegoat, and Robert Kraft even kind of issued an apology to be like, it was unfair to put him in that situation. Yada, yada, yada. Doesn't really matter. But if the Patriots don't end up with Ben Johnson, who has some links to Drake May and whatever, Mike Vrabel, who we all know his Patriots ties, and then Brian Flores, we all know his Patriots ties. If they don't end up with one of those 3 guys, firing Mayo was the wrong mistake. Because after those 3 guys, I don't know who else should be in consideration for that job. Like, obviously, Aaron Glenn, Liam Cohen, Joe Brady, those are the other kind of guys that I like. I don't think that either of those 3 guys will take the Patriots job. So if they don't end up with Johnson, Vrabel, or Flores, which I think that they'll end up with one of those 3, I think it was absolutely the wrong decision to fire Mayo. It's unfair to him. But I guess Patriots going into the offseason, they need literally everything. Again, there are 2 players on the roster, and I guess 3 if you want to count Barmore despite all of his health issues right now. But Drake May, Christian Gonzalez, and after that, everyone is replaceable at best. And obviously, like, they have guys who are starters and who will be back next year, who again are solid players, but they're all replaceable at best. And again, the hiring will matter a ton of who they eventually do bring in, but I don't see this being a quick turnaround for the Patriots, despite what some people may think. It's not a good team. It's not a talented team literally anywhere. Yeah, they have this 4th overall pick, and I don't know what they're going to do with it. They have a lot of good options, and I'll talk about one of them in a second here, but Drake May, Christian Gonzalez, maybe Christian Barmore. Other than that, you have 19 other holes on the roster to essentially fill. That's a tough task for one offseason, and obviously they'll get some guys back from injury like Bentley, and I think that's probably their only guy that really makes a difference coming back from injury, but they got some things to figure out. They got a lot of things to figure out. And again, I think at best they'll be maybe around a 500 team next year. But that doesn't put them as a good team. I like Drake May, but we can just keep going. With the number 3 pick here, we have the New York Giants. John Mara, man of his word, he said that he was not going to fire Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, and he has committed to that. He is not firing them, but basically gave them the ultimatum that it's playoffs or bust next year for them. That sucks, because again, its Giants team isn't good. It's better than some of the really bad teams and rosters in this league. Like, I do think that, like, once Andrew Thomas was out for the year, that offensive line took a big hit, and he is kind of the engine that makes that unit go. Neighbors, Tracy, they found some good people. At least their front 7 on defense is pretty damn solid. That secondary had some shit to work with, but like giving them a playoffs or bust ultimatum kind of sucks for them. And Brian Daboll, I think he was the only one that deserved to stay. I think Joe Schoen has not done a good job of being a GM. He's made some really bad decisions. The Daniel Jones contract, I think the Brian Burns trade was, again, I think Brian Burns is a good player, but that's just a move that you didn't need to make when you saw the state of your franchise. I don't know, man. What do the Giants do at pick number 3? Again, if it was me, I wouldn't pick a quarterback. And if they had a new regime in here, I don't think that they would pick a quarterback either. But I feel like Daboll and Schoen are going to feel obligated to pick a QB, and I don't think it's going to work out. I don't think either of these QBs are that good. And relying on a rookie QB to take you into the playoffs year 1 seems very, very unfair for the Giants. Again, I would go the journeyman backup. I would find someone like Jameis or Minshew, or I'm trying to think of other. I don't know. The Giants are just, or like Daboll and Schoen are on like an unwinnable position going into next year, where I don't think it matters. I don't think that there's not anything that they can do. If the ultimatum truly is playoffs or bust for them, I don't think that there's anything that they can do to make the playoffs with them unless they trade for one of like the top 15 quarterbacks in the league, which we all know that they're not going to be capable of doing that. So, yeah, let's keep going here. Picking at number 2, the Cleveland Browns, finishing 3-14 record. Another team that absolutely sucks, and they have some big decisions to make too. One of those being Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett went up to them, kind of gave them an ultimatum. He's like, you need to tell me what you plan on doing this offseason and with quarterback, because I don't want to be part of another rebuild here. Unfortunately for Myles Garrett, the Browns are 100% going to be in a rebuild. And mainly that's because of the really bad contract they gave out to the Nasty Man, but luckily for them, the nasty man seems to be just done. And when I say done, like done in the NFL. So he had his Achilles injury, and basically as soon as the season was over, it's, oh, Watson had a setback. We don't know what his progress will be going forward. Deshaun Watson will not be in the Browns facilities at all, will not put on the shoulder pads ever again. Yeah, he's definitely, I don't know, he's done. Like, his Achilles injury would already bring him back kind of like towards early middle of the year, and that's if everything went right. And whatever this setback is, I put that in air quotes there, just kind of means that they don't want him in the building next year, and they already restructured his deal where after this coming season, they have an out and they can cut him, and the money is not as bad as it would have been. So that is good. Obviously, they'll still be in a bit of cap hell because it's again, that contract wasn't good. Do they have more cap space going forward? And luckily for them, Andrew Berry did put a clause in his injury clause in the contract where if he is injured and misses like time this year, where I think they'll essentially get like $45 million back in cap the following season, and that'll roll over. So it's tough times ahead for the Browns, but to me, you take best player available at number 2. I think that'll probably be Travis Hunter. Don't draft a quarterback because you will put him in an unwinnable situation very early. Wait till next year. The quarterback group next year should be much, much better. Just take the best player available, go from there, trade Myles Garrett, as much as that sucks to hear. I think, again, if he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild, which, again, the Browns, it'll take 2-3 years to really get this team back on track again. If he doesn't want to be a part of the rebuild, trade him. Get 2 extra first-round picks. Get a couple day 2 picks as well. Build this team up. Again, they got a lot of holes on it. They got some aging guys who have had some injury history that they need to figure out as well. But I don't know. Take best player available. And the number 1 overall pick in the draft, the Tennessee Titans, who, I don't know, I kind of had like some decent hopes, and like I liked the direction of what the Titans were going, and wake up this morning, Titans fired GM Ran Carthon. I don't know why. Ran has only run the team now for the past 2 seasons. He's had 2 relatively successful drafts, got some good players from both of them. And basically, and again, he spent big money, put big in air quotes, spent some big money in free agency this year to basically see if Will Levis can be their franchise guy. They found out very quickly he is not the franchise guy, and that's fine. And the fact that they managed to end up with the first overall pick, that's good news. And now it's like, okay, you can maybe pick a quarterback, or you again take best player available. Again, if I'm picking first overall, I'm not taking a quarterback, but that's not the case. But they decided with, for now, the 4th year in a row to fire one of the coaches or the GM. So this started with John Robinson and Mike Vrabel. Vrabel won that power struggle. They hire Ran Carthon, and then they fire Vrabel. Ran Carthon wins that power struggle, and now they hire Carthon. And I don't think there was a power struggle between him and Brian Callahan. It sounds like there was a power struggle between Carthon and, again, the upper management guys ahead of him, between him and ownership there, where he didn't like how things were run, and they decided to cut bait with him. That's not how good organizations are run. And I thought what he did and the players that he did bring in, none of them really like meant anything this offseason. Calvin Ridley, yeah, did you overpay for him? But again, you needed to see if Levis was going to be your franchise guy. You needed to surround him with enough talent in order to see if he was the guy. And I think that's exactly what he did. And they ended up with the first overall pick. They had 7 one-score losses this year, where, yeah, a couple of those go the other way because Levis is an idiot, and Levis cost them multiple games this year, where all of a sudden, oh, they're picking 10th overall, and then it doesn't look like that bad. I don't know. It blows my mind that they fired him. And again, it's just another bad ownership team, where I think it's Amy Adams, not the actress, obviously, but again, I don't know what their plan is. I don't think, again, I don't think Brian Callahan really did that good of a job this year. Where if you want to fire everyone, then fire everyone. But doing the whole going back and forth between firing a GM, firing a head coach, and now it's their fourth different combination in 4 years, it's bad. I don't understand. And the Titans' direction going forward, I have no idea now. I have no idea who is going to be the GM in place. I think that the GM will just kind of have a de facto role because whoever's ahead of him ahead of him in the pecking order sounds like, I forget the guy's name too, but he sounds like an absolute dickhead. But I think that's the guy who they all have to go through now. Deion Sanders made some like eye emoji quoting the tweet after that, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of what the Titans are doing now. I like the direction that they were going in. I thought Rand Carthen had them heading into a very solid direction and going into the future, and now I'm not sold on anything. So that's it. That's kind of the preview. I'll do a very quick top 10 mock here. Do I go 10 to 1 or 1 to 10? Let's go 1 to 10 since I did just start talking about him, talking about them. So at the first overall pick, I am going with QB Shedeur Sanders. And would I make this pick? Absolutely not. Do I think that the Titans will? Yes. Don't get me wrong, I think Shedeur is a very solid prospect, but I think he's a solid prospect in the same sense that I thought that Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix were solid prospects. And Bo Nix had a great season, and it is what it is, but I think Bo Nix is a way better athlete than Sanders is. And I tweeted out today where I think that like Sanders is a day 2 guy on a lot of people's boards, but the PR behind him might land him at the first overall pick, which is absolutely insane. And I don't think that Rand Carthen was going to make this pick. I think that he was looking to trade out and be like, we'll wait till next year. And I don't know if that got people in the Titans organization a little mad, but this is how bad organizations stay bad. And I think Shedeur will be the pick. Hey, Deion Sanders says he has he doesn't want to coach in the NFL. Maybe he'll want to be a GM. I don't know. Either way, I digress. At number 2, the Cleveland Browns. They're going best player available. They're going with Travis Hunter. Someone who can be their number 1, number 2 corner next to Denzel Ward. Play a little bit of receiver for them next to Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, I have no idea who their QB is going to be, but they should not be taking a QB because they have a long road ahead of them for a rebuild, retool, whatever the hell you want to call it. So they're taking the best player on the board. That is Travis Hunter. At number 3, the Giants go with Cam Ward. Again, I think if this was a fresh new regime, the Giants are taking a quarterback. But I think that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, there is so much pressure on them to pick the guy where they're going to end up with Cam Ward, who I think his ceiling is higher than Sanders, but his floor is almost non-existent in the league. Again, I don't like this pick. If I was making this pick, I would not make this move. But this is just kind of who I feel like the Giants just feel like they're stuck, and this is just another move that they're going to make that isn't going to work out. So right now at number 3, Cam Ward. At number 4, the Patriots pick Tet McMillan out of Arizona. Big-bodied wide receiver. Give Drake May a number 1 target here. Obviously, there's a few different guys that they could have gone with. Tet McMillan being one of them. Abdul Carter being another one. Will Johnson, Mason Graham, Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell. The list goes on and on. The Patriots need a ton of guys. I went with Tet McMillan here just because I thought it was more of a fun exercise. Give Drake May like a number 1 receiver, where obviously the defense needs a lot of help, but to me, the goal for this offseason for the Patriots should be building around Drake May and making the offense a functional offense. Let the defense lapse a little bit more, which sucks to say, but you have your franchise QB. Let's surround him with talent. And I think that they will go with an offensive player with with the 4th overall pick, whether that be Tet McMillan, maybe Kelvin Banks, maybe Will Campbell, but I decided with a wide receiver here. At number 5, we get defensive tackle Mason Graham. The Jags' run defense is absolutely terrible. They need a big body dude in the middle who can stop the run while also getting to the quarterback. Adding him to a defensive line of Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, and Eric Armstead, who Eric Armstead isn't who he was when he was on the 49ers. Maybe he can play a little bit better if he has someone next to him, like taking away some of that. But Mason Graham is my best player available on the board, and I just think it makes sense for the Jags. Again, a Jags team that just needs help literally everywhere, so they go with the best player available, in my opinion. At number 6, the Raiders take cornerback Will Johnson, another best player available type thing. They need corner help. Again, they need help everywhere. I think Johnson is a top 5 player in this draft, so they're going to go with him here. At number 7, the Jets take tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. They drafted offensive tackle last year, Olufushanu. He obviously ended the season on IR. In his starts, he looked pretty damn good. So that looks like he's their left tackle of the future. Maybe the right tackle of the future because, again, he played all over the offensive line this year, which is good for them. But I don't know what the contract's like. I think they were both 1-year deals for Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses. Those guys ain't getting any younger either, so they decide to keep building the trenches, adding the number 1 tackle in the draft, in my opinion, in Kelvin Banks. At number 8 here, the Carolina Panthers get Abdul Carter, the edge out of Penn State. My number 1 edge in the draft. Probably in my top 3 players. I think he is in my top 3 players. And again, this is just kind of the way that the draft fell for when I was doing this. And I expect for Abdul Carter to go a little bit earlier. This would absolutely be a home run pick for the Panthers, who desperately need help on defense, and grabbing the arguably best defensive player in the draft would be great. But yeah, Panthers need help on edge. They're also kind of in a best player available approach. I mean, especially when it comes to defense, but they land Abdul Carter here, and they should be thrilled. At number 9, the Saints take Will Campbell, offensive lineman out of LSU. And I say offensive lineman because we don't know where he's going to play yet. He played left tackle at LSU, and he was a very, very good left tackle. One of the best in college. Obviously, he's going to be a first-round pick, top 15 pick easy, but some NFL scouts are worried about his ability and his arm length to play tackle soundly, and believe that he is better fit at guard, and that's kind of where I have him with the Saints. Saints need some offensive line help still. They drafted Tali Fuaga to be their franchise left tackle last year. Trevor Penning has looked much better at right tackle, so I think that they're pretty solid there. Beef up that interior. Again, build the trenches. If you can't do anything else, build the trenches of your team. So Will Campbell goes there, stays in Louisiana, which is kind of cool too. And then at number 10, we have the Bears pick, and they are taking tackle Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Simmons unfortunately got hurt at the start of this year, only playing in 6 games, but the tape he did put out was very, very good. Again, Bears need help on that offensive line. Getting another tackle here seems like the right thing for them to do. Sucks that the other 2 guys went off the board just a little bit earlier, but they still get someone really good in Josh Simmons. That's a top 10 mock draft. This has been a very long episode, but I did have to cover 18 teams and did throw in a top 10 mock at the end of the day. But yeah, don't have to talk about these teams now for the foreseeable future. We will be doing playoff talk coming up here. So yeah, Friday's episode is going to be wild card preview. I'm going to be going over my hot takes and my hits and misses from the preseason, and then also be giving my off-season hot takes going into free agency and the draft and all that stuff. Who goes where coaching-wise. I'll be trying to make some predictions there, but yeah, that'll do it. Good episode, good season. Disappointing season for the Dolphins, but what else is new? But as always, if you've liked this, please like, share, retweet, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Tell all your friends, and until next time, peace.